So the eighth skill that we are going to use this year for our science and engineering practices using the biology grading rubric is obtaining, evaluating, and communicating biological information. This is the eighth required skill, and you're going to do this a lot if you, especially in times where you are doing research to explain something to somebody else. Now, when you are conducting independent research, you must select multiple relevant sources that could allow you to provide detailed, comprehensive, credible information related to the topic. So that means just doing some really good research, right? Finding good sources and getting enough information, and that needs to come from multiple sources. And so if you only use two sources, you're not really going to hit it here. Also, you must evaluate the evidence and the credibility of that source because you can't really just use any source. You have to know that that source is trustworthy. So, in order to meet the standard for this skill, you must show that the source that you're choosing is one that should be chosen. Or if you choose a source that is less than ideal, you have to acknowledge the limitations of that source. Um, and the sources should, when relevant, vary in perspective or format. So they should always be the same kind. You can have different points of view. You can have one as a video, one as a research paper, one as an article. There should be a variety of sources. Now, obviously, primary sources, which are written directly by the scientist, not like a news piece that talks about the primary source, or even worse, something else is going to be ideal, right? So you don't want to use a Facebook post or an Instagram post or something like that. Uh, Although that could be posted by a primary source from by a scientist, but what you really want to look is the original article where the information comes from. Those are the best sources. Or a source that's a secondary source that's really good, like an encyclopedia or a resource that directly relates to the primary source and that actually lists those primary sources in their references. Uh, but having a variety of sources or perspectives is something else that is valued when you're trying to do a good job in this skill. And this information from multiple sources should then be compared and grouped in a way that helps deepen and understand either the argument or the explanation that you're trying to draw. By the way, this also means that this standard is going to be associated with both the arguing in biology, which is M7, which is engaging in argument for biology, and also M6, which is making connections and constructing explanations. So a lot of times when you do M6 or M7, you end up also doing M8 because you need, in order either to explain something to someone or to draw an argument, to pull information from sources. Now, the way that you put the information together is important. That's what this fourth criteria is talking about. How you group and compare the sources, it needs to be done in a way that helps deepen the understanding or argument. Then you also have to try to communicate that in a way that's clear and coherent. That means using proper grammar and proper style, right? And in a sequence or organized such that the development is intentional and it helps the audience follow along and understand what you're doing. So, uh, and when you're doing something like uh, presenting data, it needs to be done in a way that allows the audience to follow along with ease. So, for example, using data arrays, tables, charts, graphs, or formulas when you're presenting data. So, again, M8 is related to the section of experiments where you have to represent the data that has been collected. So, the results section of an experiment are going to uh, relate to this standard because you're trying to communicate the information to somebody else in a way that makes sense, that is easy to follow. Now, however you do represent this information, it needs to be done so that the information is accurate and still represents the original source document where the information comes from. And that includes proper formatting and labeling of your tables, graphs, and other things like that, so that the information can be made clear. So uh, earlier in there's another skill that's called that's M5 that talks about using computational thinking in biology. So when you're doing M5 and you're creating a graph, you are also automatically relatedly doing M8 as well. So as you can see, a lot of these skills kind of come together. And so different types of assignments might address uh, multiple skills at once because they are related to each other. Sometimes you need to do one to do the other, right? And so that's the story there. Now, I do have some key resources that can help students with this. In particular, this validating sources guide, which talks about different ways that you can evaluate your source. You, for example, asking these questions of the source and getting satisfactory answers could be a way to think about: do I know who, what, why, when these sources are from, and are they corroborated by other sources? These are questions that you can answer. If you can't answer these questions well, then maybe that source is not a good source. There's also different types of quality source tests. And I have different resources that talk about how to do that associated with each one of those. The gut, the crap, the beam, and the crap detection test are really good ones. And general advice also in this document here on how to find good sources. And I have a different video that's dedicated to this because it is a huge thing and a very important skill to get out of school with. This is called uh, critical analysis of sources, right? And having this kind of skill can help prevent you from falling prey from people who are giving you information that you may not necessarily need to trust because you don't know where it's coming from, right? So that is a very, very important critical thinking skill that you need to have. And because of that, I have a separate video dedicated just to this skill and this particular resource. I also have resources on how to create representations for data. This folder here has examples, analysis tools, how to do it with a graphing calculator, different types of graphs that you can create, and I'm also going to add a resource here on how to use Desmos to create graphs. But there's lots of different resources that you can do in order to represent your data in a way that helps the audience understand how to create those representations. I also have another document that's just about representing physical phenomena and different ideas on how to do that. All of those resources are usually attached to the types of assignments that require you to do this. So make sure you look at those resources if you're struggling with this standard. But M8 is really about communicating what you know from the sources that you gathered and knowing that you pick sources which are good sources, knowing why those sources are good sources, and then representing that information in a way that helps the audience follow that information and helps enhance the arguments or the explanation that you're trying to make. So this is how you hit those criteria, and I hope that you do that so that you make sure that you don't do anything that wouldn't make your mama proud.